Victoria Nuland of the United States opens communication channels. Panicked Ukrainians lose Donbass. Big defeat for Bayraktar. Victoria Nuland, yes to the start of dialogues and formula for peace negotiations. The American factor begins and opens channels of communication with Russia. The decision of U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Victoria Nuland to give an interview to the Russian news agency TASS in the midst of such intense Russian-American confrontation cannot be considered a coincidence. And while the Americans are beginning to open channels of communication, the Ukrainian military has been decimated in eastern Ukraine, leading even Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, to acknowledge that the situation is tragically difficult in the Donbass. Russian forces and the Wagners, that's the mercenaries, are already continuing their advance and have captured one more area in Bakhmut, which is 100% sure to fall into Russian hands. For 2 months now, the Russians have had the full initiative of the movements on the Eastern Front. And while the Ukrainians are being defeated on the front and are constantly losing territory, the Turks have also suffered a great defeat since the Bayraktar unnamed drones given to the Ukrainians have been destroyed on the front, while in the Nagorno-Karabakh war, the Bayraktars have been effective, those drones. In eastern Ukraine, they have been destroyed, defeated by Russian air defenses that have shown great effectiveness. Victoria Nuland says yes to the start of dialogue and formula for negotiations. The United States is determined even tomorrow to discuss with Russia the treaty on measures for the further reduction and limitation of strategic offense arms START and START 3 is ready for negotiations on Ukraine only according to Zelensky's formula, U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Victoria Nuland told Russia's TASS news agency. The United States is ready to return to negotiations to ensure the implementation of START 3 from the ground up. We're ready to do it tomorrow if the Russian Federation is ready for it, she said. We are also ready to allow inspections. According to the U.S., the suspension of the agreement is irresponsible. The United States and Russia have a great responsibility to the entire world to maintain the security of their nuclear arsenals. And we do have to do our job, added the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs. When asked whether the United States supports Russia's involvement in the Nord Stream pipeline undermining investigation, Nuland stressed that this is the choice of the countries that have a stake in this natural gas pipeline. It's their decision whether Russia will participate or not. Nuland reminded that the investigation is carried out by the parties, the states related to this infrastructure. At the same time, she said that the United States is successfully helping Europe to solve energy problems that have arisen due to the restriction on energy imports from the Russian Federation. She said what we're doing now with Europe, and we're doing very well, is helping Europe replace Russian oil and gas. And as you can see, not only did they manage to survive the winter, but they also have a reduction in inflation, but they still face a lot of difficulties. Yes to negotiations. Nuland, speaking about the Ukrainian conflict, noted the readiness of the United States to negotiate its settlement only on the basis of the peace formula proposed by Zelensky of Ukraine. So in other words, it's one-sided. Now, the Ukrainian side proposed a 10-point peace plan. Russia did not react to the plan in any way. If the peace talks had started on the basis of the fair peace formula proposed by the Ukrainians, of course, we would have supported it, she said. For Americans, if Russia stops fighting, the war will be over. But if Ukraine stops fighting, then Ukraine will be over, Nuland said. Arms supplies will continue. The United States does not intend to stop supplying weapons to Ukraine. She said as long as Ukraine needs to fight for its survival against Russian aggression, we will support Ukraine's ability to defend itself and restore its territorial integrity and sovereignty, Nuland said. According to the Deputy Secretary of State, the United States believes that healthy relations with the Russian Federation can be restored after the end of the Ukrainian conflict. But this whole conflict in Ukraine can stop tomorrow if Russian President Putin gives the order. We can restore proper, healthy trade ties, she said. But Russia is not moving in that direction. About China, the U.S. is worried about possible Russian assistance from China in the conflict in Ukraine. In the context of our concern about whether China will contribute to the Russian military machine now, we're having frank talks with China, and we will continue to do so, Nuland said, stressing that the U.S. is trying to stabilize relations with China, but it's not easy in context and because of the spy balloon. Musk attacks Nuland. Elon Musk of Tesla and Twitter tweeted that no one is fueling this conflict in Ukraine more than Victoria Nuland, but the U.S. diplomat would not comment, citing the fact that she did not know the source. Zelensky recognizes the situation in eastern Ukraine is tragic. The situation in eastern Ukraine was very difficult for the Ukrainian army, Ukrainian President Zelensky said. In the east, the situation is very difficult, torturous, and tragic. He described the situation in the south of Ukraine as quite dangerous. The Russian Defense Ministry said Russian forces struck Ukrainian soldiers in Kupiansk region. Ukrainians also suffered heavy losses in Krasny Liman area. In Donetsk region, over 210 Ukrainians victims, 6 armored fighting vehicles, 4 motorized vehicles, ground multiple rocket launchers. With the Wagner's mercenaries occupied Berkovka in Bakhmut, and the village of Berkovka, 7 kilometers north of Artyomovsk, in the Donetsk region, coming under full control of Russian forces, said the founder of the private military company Wagner. The Wagner PMC units have full control over Berkovka, and the village of Berkovka is located northeast of Bakhmut, not far from Paraskovievka, which was captured by Russians on February 17. It's a hub for resupplying Ukrainian forces in Donbass. The Russians sell weapon systems to 50 countries. Russia sells its military products to more than 50 countries, and demand is not decreasing. Despite pressure and smear efforts, the Federal Service for Military Technical Cooperation said Russia sells its military products to more than 50 countries. In general, the demand for Russian military products is not decreasing, despite the pressure and discrediting efforts from the West. We have solid order book, which amounts to US $50 to $55 billion, and the trend remains roughly the same at present, the state agency said. And disaster for Bayraktar, TB2. On February 23rd, the Turkish-made Bayraktar TB2 combat drone of the Ukrainian forces was shot down over Kharkov region by the Russians, of course. These Turkish drones given to the Ukrainians have been destroyed on the eastern front of Ukraine. The Bayraktar TB2 was developed by Baykar Defense, has endurance of up to 24 hours, and operational range of up to 300 kilometers. The drone is typically equipped with Canadian-made Westcam optical targeting system and can be armed with up to 4 laser-guided munition manufactured by Turkey's Roketsan. Turkey supplied dozens of Bayraktar drones to Ukraine before the start of the Russia special operation. The vast majority of Ukrainian Bayraktar Turkish drones have already been shot down or destroyed by the Russian military. Heavy losses forced Ukraine to curtail the use of its few remaining Turkish drones. According to reports, the drones are used only for reconnaissance, tens of kilometers away from the front line in the special operations zone and the Russian border. So what's going on at the front? Clashes between Russian army and Ukrainians continue near Ugledar. Clashes also raging in village of Marinka. In Kharkov, the Russian forces hit Ukrainian positions. Clashes between Russians and Ukrainians continue. And Russian forces conducting limited ground attacks near Svatov. I have no idea where these things are, I guess in the east. The graphical material published on February 23rd shows Ukrainian forces hitting Russian positions north of Novodavin, indicating a Russian advance. Russian forces continue ground attacks, Bakhmut made regular gains in the area. The Ukrainian General Staff reported Russian troops continue to attack Ukrainian positions in Bakhmut itself. Now, the Wagner mercenaries has partially regained control of lost positions along Bakhmut Highway, blocking routes and approaching the southeastern suburbs of Ivanivsk. The Wagner positions in eastern Bakhmut within 400 meters of the front line. The representative of Ukrainian Defense Force, Colonel Olensky Dmitrashkivsky, noted that Russian forces have increased their activity in the area, and a Russian released footage of Donetsk 56 Spetsnaz Special Forces Battalion pounding Ukrainian positions and claimed the battalion was advancing meter by meter. So this is back from Banking News Greece. I've translated this for you from a Greek article. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support, and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box.